Just after 9 in the morning, a call reaches emergency dispatch from one of the most secure neighborhoods in Texas. Round-the-clock security, gated entry, homes worth well over $1 million. A place where nothing is supposed to go wrong. The caller is frantic. He says he has just come home and found his girlfriend and her 2 daughters inside, unresponsive. Deputies arrive within minutes. They find the homeowner sitting on the front lawn, his face buried in his hands. He appears to be crying. But something catches their attention immediately.
According to later reporting, deputies noted that although Wheeler appeared to be crying, they did not observe visible tears.
Upstairs, on the second floor of the home, they find 3 bodies: a mother, her 16-year-old daughter, her 10-year-old daughter. All 3 have been gone for hours. Within days, investigators will reach a conclusion, but 7 years later, that conclusion is still being questioned by the people who knew this family best. This is the story of what happened inside that house, and why, after all this time, nobody can agree on the truth. Before we continue, a quick note. This case involves the loss of a mother and 2 young children, so if that subject is heavy for you now, please take care of yourself first. If you're still with me, I want you in this community. Like and subscribe now, because this channel exists to walk through cases exactly like this one,
where people continue to debate whether the official findings fully account for all of the available evidence.
Leave a comment and tell me what city or country you're watching from. I read every single one, and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about the truth as much as you do. Now, let's get into what officially happened and why so many people close to this case refuse to accept it. January 10th, 2019, Bexar County, Texas. The community is called Anaqua Springs Ranch, a gated subdivision northwest of San Antonio, built for people who wanted privacy and safety in equal measure. The 9 a.m. call comes from the homeowner, a man named Charles Wheeler. He tells dispatch he has just returned home and discovered his girlfriend, Nichol Olsen, and her 2 daughters inside. Deputies find all 3 upstairs. The medical examiner will later determine they had already been gone for hours. Within days, Bexar County reaches its conclusion. The 2 girls, ruled homicide victims. Nichol, ruled to have taken her own life after ending theirs. On paper, the case is closed. But almost immediately, the people who knew this family are telling reporters that the story does not match the woman they knew. To understand why so many people pushed back against the official ruling, you need to understand who these 3 people actually were and who the man at the center of this case was as well. Nichol Olsen was 37 years old. She worked as a hairstylist and had recently started a small jewelry line with a group of friends. People who knew her described someone impossible to ignore in a room. Energetic, warm, the kind of person who built genuine friendships everywhere she went. Her longtime friend, Aaron Seaman, would later tell reporters he refused to believe she was capable of hurting her own children. Her oldest daughter, Alexa Montez, was 16. She was a cheerleader and volunteered at her church. Her father has said publicly that despite the normal distance of teenage years, the 2 of them stayed close. Her youngest daughter, London Bribiescus, was 10. Friends of the family remember her as bright and affectionate, the kind of child adults gravitated toward. Then there is Charles Wheeler. Wheeler grew up with money. As a young man, he competed in professional rodeo, then used his winnings to launch a security company at just 21 years old. 3 years later, he sold that business and started a second one that reportedly brought in millions in annual revenue. By the time he met Nichol in 2016, Wheeler was a wealthy young entrepreneur living in a home worth roughly $1 million inside one of San Antonio's most exclusive communities. They met the way a lot of relationships begin now. He came across her online and sent her a message. What followed was fast. Within a year, Nichol and her daughters had moved into his home. On the surface, it looked like she had landed in a life of stability and comfort. what was happening behind the walls of that house would tell a very different story. In 2017, about a year into dating, Wheeler purchased the Anaqua Springs home. Nichol moved in shortly after, along with Alexa in London. To the outside world, this looked like success, a gated community, private security, a successful boyfriend willing to provide for her and her daughters. But according to a wrongful death lawsuit filed years later on behalf of one of the girls, the relationship inside that house told a different story. The filing describes lengthy arguments between Nichol and Wheeler and alleges that in the months leading up to her death, Nichol's behavior had become increasingly erratic. That same lawsuit makes another claim. It states that Wheeler kept a loaded handgun beside his bed and that he had personally taught Nichol how to use it. Hold on to that detail. It becomes central to everything that follows. Public records show that in the year before the deaths, deputies had already been called out to that address on more than one occasion. What triggered those calls has never been made public, but it tells us something serious enough was happening inside that home to draw law enforcement attention more than once before January ever arrived. And quietly, according to people close to her, Nichol appeared to be preparing for something, a change, a way out. In the weeks leading up to her death, Nichol had started looking at apartments. Records later obtained by local reporters show an email sent to her from a leasing office just a few miles from Wheeler's home, arriving on the very day she is believed to have died. The days before January 9th looked by every account completely ordinary. She confirmed appointments at the salon, she spoke with coworkers about her upcoming schedule, she kept living her life the way anyone would who had no intention of ending it. At 11 p.m. that night, a call goes out from Nichol's phone to Wheeler's mother. It is not answered. 1 minute later, at 11:10, the first of 4 calls goes out from that same phone to emergency services. 2 more calls follow at 11:11, a fourth at 11:12. 3 of those 4 attempts never connect. They exist only as records, attempts made and abandoned in seconds. 1 call does connect. According to reporting on the case, that connection did not produce a usable location, and no further detail from it has ever been made public. 4 attempts to reach emergency services within 3 minutes, in the middle of the night, inside a home where 3 people would be found deceased the next morning. Security footage from the community gate does show a truck matching Wheeler's vehicle leaving that night. When investigators were later asked directly whether that footage clearly showed the driver, the answer, confirmed publicly by the sheriff himself, was no.
For years, many key details about those overnight hours came primarily from Wheeler's account of what happened after the argument.
In the days following January 10th, the community response was immediate and visible.
A visitation was held for all 3 at a funeral home in San Antonio. Services followed shortly after at a local church, drawing friends, extended family, and members of the community who had followed the story from the moment it broke. A vigil was later held at a local grotto where people who had never met the family gathered to show support. A fundraiser started in London's name, tied to a family friend at a nearby zoo where the 10-year-old had spent time just weeks before her death, raised tens of thousands of dollars within days. Not long after, the Anaqua Springs home itself went up for sale. It sold for under $1 million, closing the physical chapter on a property that had, for a brief time, become one of the most talked-about addresses in Texas. But while the house changed hands, the case itself was far from finished. For years, this case moved in a pattern of starts and stops that left both families without the closure they were promised. By the end of 2020, the sheriff's office had hoped to close the investigation. That did not happen. In a written statement, Sheriff Javier Salazar said he had reviewed the case file and found too many unanswered questions, adding that he was not satisfied with it as a finished product. The case was sent back to investigators in early 2021. From there, it was reassigned to a detective who specializes in cold cases. Over the following years, the Federal Bureau of Investigation was brought in to assist, an unusual step the sheriff himself acknowledged was rare for his department. Eventually, the Texas Rangers were asked to review the evidence as well. Each agency that touched this case added scrutiny. None of them, according to public statements from the sheriff's office, has produced anything that overturns the original ruling. But the years of reassignment, review, and re-review tell their own story. This was never treated internally as a simple or settled matter. While investigators moved slowly, the families did not. Both girls' fathers filed separate wrongful death lawsuits against Wheeler. The suits argue that Wheeler bears responsibility for what happened that night, citing the unsecured firearm kept in the home and his decision to leave that night, despite what the filings describe as visible signs of distress. One family's attorney publicly accused the sheriff's office of delaying the case, suggesting the timing was connected to an approaching legal deadline for filing civil claims. That same attorney later helped send a formal request to the Texas Attorney General, asking that the investigation be handed over entirely to the Texas Rangers rather than remain with the county. Two additional details have surfaced over the years, and it's important to be direct about how reliable they are. Sources described as close to the investigation have said that communications recovered in the hours before the deaths raised a question about the paternity of one of the daughters. Separately, one of the fathers has stated publicly that at least one life insurance policy was paid out following the deaths. Neither claim has been confirmed directly by the sheriff's office, and both should be treated as unresolved threads in an already complicated case, not established fact. What is established is this: two grieving families, convinced the system had not given them real answers, took their fight into civil court and kept pushing publicly years afterwards. For a long time, the public version of this case stayed frozen. Murder-suicide, case closed, nothing more to see. Then, in March of 2026, a newly obtained sheriff's report changed that. The report reveals that investigators found more than one firearm inside the home, not simply the one recovered near Nichol. It also confirms that a projectile was recovered from a wall inside the upstairs hallway, a detail never previously disclosed to the public.
The report also documents evidence found in several areas of the home, including the upstairs hallway, near a stairwell railing, and close to the garage entrance. Investigators additionally collected samples from a shower drain and a bathtub drain inside the master suite. When asked directly about this evidence, Sheriff Salazar gave a careful answer, noting that some of the samples collected came back negative using standard testing swabs. But that response does not erase what was separately documented elsewhere inside that home, evidence the public had never been told about until this report surfaced. Despite the new details, the sheriff's office maintains that nothing uncovered so far contradicts the original ruling. As of now, the case remains officially closed unless new evidence changes that. It's important to be completely clear about something at this point in the story. No one has ever been arrested in this case. No one has ever been formally charged. There has been no trial and no courtroom verdict of any kind. Charles Wheeler was named a person of interest early in the investigation. He was never named a suspect. His attorneys have publicly maintained his innocence throughout and have called the civil lawsuits against him without merit. What exists instead is a case that has been reviewed by a county sheriff's office, the FBI, and the Texas Rangers, that remains classified as closed under the original ruling, and that continues to generate new evidence, new reports, and new questions nearly a decade after it began. That combination, a firm official conclusion sitting alongside years of unresolved doubt, is exactly why this case refuses to fade. Before we close this out, I want to hear from you directly. Based on everything laid out here, does the evidence support the official ruling?
Or does it raise more questions than it answers? Tell me in the comments. Some of the sharpest insight on this channel comes from the people watching it. 7 years later, Nichol, Olsen, Alexa Montez, and London Briviescus still do not have the resolution their families have spent nearly a decade demanding. The Bexar County Sheriff's Office maintains the case is closed, but a report that surfaced only months ago already added details, evidence, and testing results the public had never been given the first time around. That alone shows that significant investigative details became public years after the original ruling, leaving many questions in the minds of the families and the public. A mother and her 2 daughters lost their lives inside a home built to be one of the safest in Texas. Whatever truly happened behind those doors that night, their story deserves more than a closed file and a report that took 7 years to reach daylight. If this case sat with you the way it sat with me, it's okay to take a moment before moving on to whatever comes next. And if you want to be here the moment new developments in this case break, subscribe now. This is exactly the kind of story we return to again and again until the truth actually catches up to it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.